I've mentioned this topic a few times in my previous videos, but I think it's time to dedicate an entire video to it. Assassin's Creed is known for its unique concept of the Animus, which sets the story in the modern day and enables access to the genetic memories of ancestors through a machine. This allows the protagonists in the modern day to experience the stories of their ancestors in a video game-esque scenario within their minds. Whether you love or hate this concept, it does offer a chance for the simulations of the ancient world to have some interesting deviations from reality. For instance, the world loading visually at the beginning of sequences, or the music in the earlier games having a modern synth mixed in with the traditional melody, reminding players that they are inside of a simulation. The most explicit form the Animus takes in the story is through the memory corridors. Whenever you kill an important figure in the story, time slows down and transports you to a space outside of reality, where the assassin and their targets can have a back and forth dialogue and confess their feelings. At least, that is the idea in concept. In a franchise where your targets can go from being integral to the story or just a one-off plot device, the memory corridors offer a chance to give these villains more depth in their dying moments. The differing reactions say a lot about their ideology and can develop our hero by challenging their beliefs. Suffice to say, these moments are some of the best writing Assassin's Creed has to offer, and without them, the game just wouldn't be the same. With over 15 years of entries and a dozen different writers, we have seen many interpretations of what the memory corridor should be, for better or worse, embraced or exploited. This video takes a deep dive into how the Assassin's Creed games handled their memory corridors, highlighting both good and bad examples, to come up with a natural conclusion on the best way to write these scenes in a way that does them justice. Before we get started, don't forget to like and subscribe to stay up to date on the latest uploads, and please note that this video will contain minor spoilers for Assassin's Creed Mirage. Now let's find out what happened to the memory corridors in Assassin's Creed.
You truly believe you were helping them? It's not what I believe, it's what I know.
Starting at the beginning, Assassin's Creed 1 paves the way for the memory corridor, which sets the foundation for how it could evolve over time. In these confessions, the Animus prompts a more cinematic camera view, allowing targets to walk about and convey their motivations as if they were still alive. AC1's kills are not too memorable because of a very simple issue. The first time that we meet these characters is during their deaths, leaving very little time to give them fleshed out characters or development. Hence, AC1 follows a linear structure, where we learn about these targets from others, build up their effect on the city and its people, before killing them. If the memory corridors didn't exist, then these targets would be utterly void of character. The glitches where the characters walk around are an attempt to fill in scenes where we should have seen Altair interact with his targets beforehand, so the storytelling tries to catch us up by having the targets act as if they were still alive. The Animus trickery allows us to fill the gap by halting the pace of the game to have these discussions. The dialogue in AC1 was much less concerned about developing Altair as a character, but more about the story and Altair as a result of the events around him. These memory corridors add exposition and make Altair question the ways of Al-Mualim, leading to confrontations when he next speaks to him. The Templars serve the purpose of making Altair question his allegiances and whether the Assassins and Templars are so different after all.
You would have done the same. To save the ones you love.
Yes, I would. And I have.
In AC2 onwards, the memory corridors find their footing and their place in the story as cinematic means of storytelling, allowing the Templars to have prior involvement in the story and a more personal connection. This personal connection allows their deaths to hold more meaning. For instance, let's look at Francesco de Pazzi, a character who was the father of Ezio's childhood rival. After the death of Vieri, Francesco launches a full-force attack on Florence and attempts to assassinate Lorenzo de' Medici. Taking a final stand on the roof of the Palazzo della Signoria, he shows his true colours of being a coward and runs away after insulting Ezio for being a lapdog to Lorenzo, proving himself to be an unworthy leader. He runs away before Ezio finally finishes him off, hanging his body as a warning to the other conspirators that he is coming for them, causing them to flee to Tuscany. This sequence is brilliant and tells us a lot about Ezio and Francesco. However, what brings it all together is the memory corridor. This is proof that the pages of exposition from AC1 may have their place, but when the storytelling is so strong outside of it, then the only words Francesco needed to say in death is that it's finally over.
It's all over.
You can hear how relieved he is to say this, proving his cowardice, but also his motivation to be free of the Templar control. The stark white background without any glitches or flashing icons allows us to focus on the motivation of the characters, and in this case, that was a peaceful silence. The memory corridor is one of the most effective displays in Assassin's Creed, shining a spotlight on the conflict and judging the characters as individuals outside of the cult-like status that both the Assassins and Templars have. It serves as a reminder that there are humans behind the hood. As the game series progressed, the memory corridor developed into some interesting subversions, particularly in Assassin's Creed Revelations. This game marked the first time that the memory corridor was used to trick players into thinking that a character was dead before a surprise attack, subverting the expectations and making it into an action piece. Revelations was the end of that era of Assassin's Creed games, and the game executed the subversion brilliantly.
Better we hold the strings than another.
No, the strings should be severed. All should be free.
And we should live forever on castles in the sky. You wield your blade like a man, but your mouth like a child.
Assassin's Creed 3 and 4 have easily the best memory corridors in the series, with impeccable writing that deserves praise. The targets in these games were the most well-rounded and defined characters, with motivations that were intrinsic to Connor and Edward's stories. The likes of Ben Hornigold, an ally turned enemy who joined the Templars because he wanted to feel safe in a civilization that would last, were especially interesting. These scenes are written like theatre performances, with minimal exposition and characters who motivate the story. Assassin's Creed Rogue and Syndicate, however, showed a poor level of writing, with Rogue having some of the worst written and clunkiest memory corridors in the series.
Hope was right. I do make a good distraction.
Syndicate lacked narrative direction in general, meaning that many of the kills offered meaningless ideas and suggestions of an arc that could trick players into thinking about exploring these themes, only for it never to be mentioned again. The episodical way Syndicate paces its missions means that the themes don't carry across, and the Templars in the game have difficulty standing out because of how ill-defined the assassins are.
Knowledge could a king of the gutters offer us? The intrigues of rats? You may go.
The intrigues of rats? Pompous fool, if I could lay my hands on him.
Assassin's Creed Unity, however, took a different approach entirely, by removing the memory corridors and instead using flashback montages that showed Arno what the character he'd killed had just been up to, providing him with clues about his next target. While some people attribute this to Arno's eagle vision or other supernatural powers, these are really just scenes that didn't fit in anywhere else. While the visual exposition is better than telling it, it also means that Arno is never really challenged by the Templars. If you need proof of how important these confessions are, just look at how little we know about Arno without them. He doesn't speak to most of his targets, so we have no idea how he feels about them or his actions. We only know that they affect him in a broad story-based way, such as Sever killing Arno's adopted father, but aside from that, we have no idea what killing any of these people means to Arno. Thankfully, this was fixed in later games. Even if Syndicate was a bit of a mess, the walking glitches that were present in AC1 were brought back with the same effect, to say, we didn't have scenes of these guys walking around, so here's a bit of that.
You could not even save your own son. You are no one. Bayek of nothing. Father to nobody!
The memory corridors in Assassin's Creed Origins brought significant innovation to the franchise, the most since AC2, and it's a change that is still prevalent today. Unlike the previous games, Origins emphasised the mythology of the period, and players were given full dream sequences with afterlife depictions that the characters imagined. Bayek's memory corridor is a prime example of this, where Egyptian gods oversee the characters, and the environment is manipulated by the waters. Bayek sees visions of his son and his targets, while they lose their existing personalities, and instead become the inner reflection of Bayek's own thoughts. They speak to their gods, trying to justify their actions, while Bayek grounds them in reality and argues against their deeds. These scenes are remarkable, highlighting how people react to death and apply it to the time period where people turned to their gods. It's an incredible feature. That's why Odyssey chose to leave them out entirely, which is probably a good thing, because they would have found a way to mess that up too. However, Valhalla goes back on this idea by having the characters speak to each other in a dark void, with Odin as their witness. While I like that Eivor must justify the death to Odin, it takes away from the point of these interactions being a one-on-one moral battle between two people. It feels a bit heavy-handed that Eivor is a reincarnated Isu, and that personality is trying to break through, which works narratively, but I'm not personally a fan. Eivor should have been given a better chance to stand on their own without a literal bird on their shoulder.
Only the self hears the deepest whispers of your soul and accepts you whole.
No one lives alone.
Now we finally come to the latest entry, Assassin's Creed Mirage, and the reason I decided to go ahead and make this video. After analysing enough of these memory corridors, I've come to an understanding about the ways in which they're written, and when I saw the first memory corridor in Mirage, I knew it was going to be similar for the rest of the game. AC Mirage is a remake of AC1 in more ways than I could have ever expected, because the game borrows heavily from the investigation system from the first game. The game is split into a prologue, 6 or 7 investigations leading to a black box mission, and then on repeat until a conclusion. This game has the same issues as AC1. You never meet your targets until you kill them. When you begin the first black box mission to kill Al Ghul, Basim gives a recap on who he is, which is a good sign that Ubisoft knew that nobody would be paying attention during the investigation portion of the game. We hear Basim calmly declare this character's evil actions, which locks the voice actor in a box because he'll need to do this for every character despite what Basim's emotions may be towards them. He could have a personal vendetta and be furious towards them, but he would still need to speak to the audience and break that immersion to tell us who they are before confronting them. It's also a real shame that Basim doesn't really meet his targets beforehand, at least in a meaningful way that impacts the story. Hiding them behind similar masks strips them of individuality, or a strong character design to make them memorable. And almost all of the actual memory corridors are just a massive wink to the audience that Basim is not alone and going to be taken over by the Jinn. It's the same as Valhalla, but if the villains were also aware of Odin being there. Al Ghul says that Basim is more than just a hidden one, and then we see the Jinn. Alberica goes on a long monologue about what it's like to die alone, and then Basim sees that he is not alone, because there's a Jinn. We know there's a Jinn, and Basim has very little to say about the fact that there is a Jinn, so the story doesn't feel like it's moving in any kind of direction. It's like if every target that Altair killed gave some vague statement about how somebody close to him couldn't be trusted. It's a perfect demonstration of why I think Basim suffers massively from Mirage. I adore parts of this game. I think the parkour is actually a really good deviation, and the combat is the best that Assassin's Creed has ever had, but I cannot deny that the storytelling is weaker than I could have imagined from a game that was sold as a smaller, story-focused narrative. Now that we've looked at the history, let's look at the current state of things. Let's start with the pros. The foundation from AC2 is solid. It uses the corridors to quite literally blind the player, but at the same time shines a spotlight on the characters and gives them a finale that crescendos their plot lines, instead of being their entire plot line. This method also helps the villains feel more fleshed out. No villain has become iconic from their death scene alone, although Thomas Hickey comes pretty close.
I'm the type of guy who likes to have a beer in one hand and a tea in the other.
The dialogue. The dialogue should prioritise the confessions. It should answer the question of what the characters would say in their dying moments, and what they would admit to. This would impact the ideology of our hero, challenging it and making them think more about their approach to life in the future. The presentation. The presentation of Origins' memory corridors is visually stunning. It uses visuals more than dialogue to convey a beautiful presentation that is more iconic than the villains themselves. I remember the lady chilling with the giant alligator more than her actual character. That already makes her more memorable than all of Syndicate's Templars. AC2 may have great dialogue, but its memory corridors are a simple shot that looks duller than Mirage's cutscenes. Oh snap! Innovating with the visuals is definitely the way forward. These scenes take place out of time, seemingly in their own part of reality, before the targets have died, and the characters have no idea that it's even happening. I love that it's never even tried to be explained. The closest we've gotten is when George Washington got the Piece of Eden. He was able to detect that a memory corridor was happening and break through the walls of the Animus to interrupt Connor's killing of Benjamin Franklin, and more importantly, prevent it. Using the space, he then fought Connor out of bounds from the world, which by the way is still friggin' cool. The cons. One of the pitfalls that a lot of Assassin's Creed games fall into is using exposition as a crutch and relying on memory corridors as a formulaic approach to storytelling. This can make the kills predictable and lack creativity. However, Unity and Odyssey show how essential these scenes are in breaking up the flow of gameplay with something different. It's also important to keep these scenes in the game, but also to ensure that they are written more fluidly within the story, so they feel like a natural part of the narrative rather than just a box to tick. If they are not important to the target, then they can be cut. The execution of memory corridors has varied greatly across different entries. Origins brought them back in spectacular fashion, but Valhalla and Mirage have taken steps back instead of forwards. The best memory corridors are still in AC3 and AC4, due to the well-defined characters and their tremendous conclusions. However, the Templars have been pushed to the background in later titles, and the Isu have become the prominent threat of the narrative. Mirage's targets don't feel important because they all remind us of a bigger and more important threat that exists, and that they are simply a means to an end and not worth our time. It is crucial to make these scenes matter again, to impact the characters and to build upon what should already be a good narrative. By placing two characters in a quiet room where they can have an argument or an understanding of each other, these scenes can become more personal and meaningful. With that said, I'd like to hear from you now. What's your favourite memory corridor and what makes it so special? Share your thoughts in the comments section below and let me know your thoughts. I recently launched a Patreon page with a £1 tier where I will be providing sneak peeks of my upcoming videos, and I'm also seeking feedback on my ideas and scripts. Your support would mean the world to me and help me create more videos like this. A link for that will be in the description if you want to check it out. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay up to date, and I'll see you in the next video.
And a tea in the other.